You are listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. I'm Elena Paweta, Executive Communication Coach and TEDx organizer. With each episode, I'll share with you communication tips and ideas from top business leaders to help you excel in your career. Hello, welcome to the next episode of Ideas and Leaders podcast. And today, my guest is Nidhi Tewari. She's an international speaker. She's also a licensed clinical social worker and mental health therapist with a decade of expertise in the mental health field. Nidhi is an absolute expert in the fields of self-care, burnout, resilience, trauma, imposter syndrome, and these are the topics that we're going to discuss today. Hi, Nidhi, it's great to have you here.
Hi, Elena, it's so great to see you, and thank you so much for inviting me to be here today.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you here. I know that you're an expert in mental health, and we are discussing the topics of leadership a lot on this podcast, where we are speaking often about how leaders should behave and what problems they're facing. And I would say that mental health issues are it is quite a big topic for managers, for leaders. So what do you think, based on your experience, why it is important to speak about mental health in business?
I think that mental health actually goes very much hand in hand with business. So when you're a leader of a corporation or a leader of your business, there's a lot of pressures that are placed on you. And so you are having to not only manage the business end of things, but you're also managing the well-being of your employees. And with the pandemic having happened over 2020 and now going into 2021, it also added another layer of pressure to leadership, right? So we had to pivot. We had to suddenly make decisions that we didn't have to make before. And I think that the stress ends up mounting and accumulating with time, especially for those of us who are in leadership roles.
Yes, you're totally right that especially now in this pandemic situation, it is so hard for many leaders. And I can tell you from my perspective, because I am a leader in a nonprofit organization. I'm a district director in Toastmasters International. So I was leading several countries in Europe when a pandemic started. And me being a leader, holding a leadership position, it meant that everyone started talking to me and asking me what should they do. And it was such a big pressure because I did not know what to do. No one knew what is going on. So I would say that not in everyday life, but especially now, leaders are under so much pressure and they have to make decisions and answer questions. So based on your experience, what were the effects of the pandemic on mental health and burnout issues in business?
I think that there's multiple layers to it. So I think that first, the pandemic created a sense of isolation that we had never experienced before. So if leaders had pressure placed on them before and felt like they had to be the heads of the decision-making team, now all of a sudden they were especially having to make decisions in isolation because they didn't necessarily have the same access to their leadership teams in person to come together and put their heads together for solutions. So that was number one. Number two, of course, that same isolation impacts us socially. So now we're the recharge ability, right? With being able to socialize with our friends, going out to restaurants, seeing musical performances, all of that at the drop of a hat got taken away because of the pandemic and for safety reasons. And so now we have the struggles of having to pivot during a pandemic, having to lead, which is already a bit of an isolating feeling for many leaders, that then being compounded by not having the ability to recharge and engage in good self-care. So I think that, all of these factors combined create a unique dynamic that puts a lot of stress and leads to burnout. There's also the organizational factor, which I'm sure that we'll get to later on in this conversation. But it's a multifaceted challenge that I think leaders in particular face through this really difficult time.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So when you're a leader, and a lot of people who are listening to us, they are team leaders, they are business leaders, they are entrepreneurs, and well, you are stressed, of course, but you never know, and you cannot guess and say 100% if this is a burnout, if this is something serious, or it is just a normal, let's say, everyday stress. So how do you recognize if what I'm feeling, how can I recognize if I have burnout, or it is about to start, or if I'm just stressed at work?
That's a great question. You know, I think that there's a fine line between the two. So when we're experiencing traditional stress, which life includes stress, right? So the expectation isn't that we're never going to experience stressors in our lives, right? But it's our ability to cope and overcome. And I think the same as any mental health diagnosis, which burnout technically doesn't fall under a mental health diagnosis, though the World Health Organization recognized burnout and they classified it in the International Classification of Disease as of 2019, I believe. So now it's being looked at more from that model. I think that part of the challenge, right, is how is it affecting our functioning? So when when stress becomes burnout, I think that what ends up happening is our ability to overcome and cope is diminished. So now we may have difficulties being able to show up and do our jobs at work, or we carry so much of that stress home that we're having difficulties with sleep or with being able to connect with our families. And so I think it's really a differentiation between, is it manageable and is it something that on a day-to-day basis I feel I'm able to overcome? Or is it coming into the realm now of affecting my functioning, both at work and outside of work as well?
Yeah, yeah. So what are the main reasons that managers get burnout at work? Are there any scientific, maybe is there any scientific proof of what exactly should we avoid doing, or what maybe we should be doing more?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an interesting interplay between the organizational factors and the human factor, right? So they both connect to one another and are kind of intertwined. So the organizational factors are actually at the core of burnout. All right, so Christina Maslach determined 6 factors that play into burnout. And she determined, and this was a research study that she had done with some of her colleagues, that there's 6 different factors. So one is unsustainable workload. So how much work is being placed on the employee, and is it actually manageable for them to have to balance all of these different tasks that are on their plate? The second is perceived lack of control. So when you're in the workplace, do you feel as though you have a say as to what you can and can't do? And often we may feel disempowered in the workplace, that somebody may look at us as though we're not capable enough as a leader if we say my plate is overfilled and I'm not able to take any more on. The third factor is insufficient rewards at work. So what's the intrinsic benefit that we're getting when we're showing up and we're working so hard? And if we feel as though our work goes unappreciated or unnoticed, that is a significant factor for burnout, right? Because now the reward isn't matching up with the level of effort. The fourth factor is about a lack of community support. So how is the community and the organizational structure rallying around their employees? Because I think that it's really critical that we have layers of support built in there. Some of the organizations that I've worked with previously, not only was I getting supervision with my supervisor, where they worked with me to staff different cases or discuss challenges I was encountering, but then they also received supervision and so on and so forth, all the way up to the highest level. Everyone had support. So I think that that is a built-in way to help mitigate some of the impact of burnout. The fifth factor is a lack of fairness. So do we feel that the workload is evenly distributed? Or is there a perceived sense that I'm always the one that's taking on somebody else's workload? Or that when a new assignment comes in, because I work so hard, is it coming straight to me because I can handle it, right? So that's that fifth factor. And the sixth one is mismatched values and skills. So when we have a value of, I want to be able to have a supportive work environment, I would like for people to be able to be in flux and have flexibility with me when I'm at work. If that's misaligned with the organizational structure, it's a recipe for burnout. So I think that if we pay attention to those six factors, that's really critical in noticing what are the organization's role in terms of burnout, and then how is it affecting us as a human being who's working there in that organization.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning those factors. It is, I think it is quite important to know that all of them can influence our well-being. And if we're not getting, praised enough, if we're not having good atmosphere at work, then a lot of those things can influence our well-being, and in the end we will have this burnout. So what do you recommend to people who recognize those first burnout symptoms, and they say that, okay, I'm too stressed, I'm taking stress home, I'm not able to focus on one task, I'm thinking about many different issues at the same time, and they start to feel overwhelmed? What do you recommend them to do when they just start noticing those symptoms?
Yeah, I think that it's really important that we have an awareness, right? I went through a period in my life where in 2018, I really didn't even recognize I was starting to burn out. I'd lost my best friend to stage 4 brain cancer, and I thought that overworking and committing more to my work was going to help me to grieve. But by doing that, I ended up missing all of the hallmark signs that I was struggling, because I was having difficulties being able to show up to work. Once I was there, my focus was completely off. I didn't necessarily feel as though I had that support, but I tried to compartmentalize it and ignore it. And what happened is, of course, it just got worse and the symptoms got exacerbated. And before I knew it, I was taking tons of time off from work, and I was really falling behind when previously I was a leader at my job, right? So I think that awareness is so crucial initially, because if we can notice what's happening, that internal experience, and connect with it, then we can start to jump into action and go to a place of getting support, reaching out to our supervisors, reaching out to our colleagues, being able to get some accommodations in place, seeking out a therapist, and really connecting with family and friends on a deeper level that helps to mitigate some of that burnout effect that may occur because of this overwhelm at work.
Mm-hmm. And yes, this is actually a very, very interesting issue. And I remember that we were chatting about this, that a lot of us, we are kind of hiding stress and hiding this some other problems or issues behind our work, and we start doing more and taking more tasks, doing more things, and just not to think about our problems, not to think about our past traumas, or the fact that we lost a family member, or the fact that we have problems in our marriage or whatever. So and you went through this yourself, and you said that you went through this, you realized. So how would you recommend what would you recommend to do in order to realize that, yes, maybe this is not just me being super high performer, but maybe this is just me trying not to think about other important things?
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting, because I think so often as leaders, we wear burnout as a badge of honor. We kind of look at overworking as, wow, look at how much I'm doing. And then there's this feedback loop that happens where people say, oh my gosh, you're doing such a great job. Look at all these achievements. You're amazing. And so then our reward system in our brain is activated, and we're like, oh, this feels good. And it makes it really challenging then in those moments to recognize, oh, wait a second, I'm only getting 5 hours of sleep a night because I'm so overwhelmed and overthinking what I have to do the next day. Or, oh my gosh, I work until 8, 9 p.m. in the evenings, and now I have no time to spend with my husband or my kids or, my pet or whatever the case may be, right? So I think that part of the awareness is recognizing what's changing for you. What is the difference now in your functioning? Because there's going to be subtle changes in your appetite and the way that you're sleeping and the way that you're interacting with others. How are you taking care of yourself? Often that's the first thing that goes by the wayside is our self-care when we're overworking and are overachieving as a way to ignore our feelings or compartmentalize. And it's a pretty common experience, actually, that we want to avoid pain because pain is discomfort. But by doing so, we're only simply delaying the inevitable, which is that it's going to come up in a different way. And sometimes it can physically affect you. So for me, I actually got physically ill. Like I almost was hospitalized with pneumonia because my body was shutting down from the level of stress. And so I missed all of these signs, right? That were telling me, wait a second, slow down. You need to take some time for yourself. And instead, then my body communicated it to me by getting really ill, right? So if we don't take care of the burnout and if we don't notice these factors, right, then something may happen where our body starts to tell us pretty firmly that we need to pause and take a break.
Yeah, absolutely. And we covered this in a couple of other episodes of Ideas and Leaders that as leaders, as managers, we need to prioritize self-care, and we need to remember that if we are doing fine, if our body and our mind is in a good shape, then only then we can be great leaders to others. Great leadership starts with self-leadership, and this is a very important issue that you mentioned. And I think that I can so much relate to what you're saying because I went through this cycle myself. I had several years in my life when I was performing on a very high level in many different areas. I was a member of several organizations. I was working really, really, really hard. And I did not realize that I was doing this only after some time when I actually started to have some health problems. And I said, wait, so I need to take care of myself, because if I want to serve others, to be able to help others with what I do, then I need to be in a good shape. So absolutely, this is the first sign that we need to look at. Are we putting ourselves first, or we are putting our job and our tasks first?
Exactly. Yeah, and we can't pour from an empty cup, right? So what do we have to give the teams that we're leading or our family or our friends if we're so depleted that we're sick all the time or we're just completely emotionally drained? We're not showing up as our best selves in those moments, right? So I totally agree with you. And I so appreciate you sharing your story, because I think so many people can relate to that. We tend to overachieve and overextend in those moments instead of really paying attention to, wait a minute, what's my body saying? And how am I somaticizing some of the things that I'm experiencing emotionally, right? Absolutely agree with you.
Yes, this is really great point. So we discussed how to recognize burnout. What are some of the reasons that can lead to burnout? But what about people who say that, well, I don't have any burnout, I'm just fine, it's not about me, it's not for me? What would you recommend them to do or not to do to prevent some mental health issues? And mental health issues in business are now really big thing, and I can see that a lot of people are struggling with this. A lot of people are struggling with this in silence, and not reaching out and not speaking about this. So whether they feel that they have some issues, or maybe they say that I don't have any issues. So what would you recommend to do to prevent those issues?
I think that first off, if anybody's listening and they're feeling as though I don't want to acknowledge that maybe this is something I'm struggling with, I want to put it out there that you are not alone. Elena and I are both talking about how we've gone through this process, and there are millions of leaders out there who are incredibly high achieving individuals who have also gone through something similar. So that's the first thing, right? Is that sometimes resistance and acknowledgement is because we're afraid that we may be looked at differently or that we may be alone in this experience. And I think recognizing that this is actually a very common experience, unfortunately, for many, many people out there. And the second piece is really looking at what are your routines and what are your boundaries when it comes to work-life balance, right? So when you're in a leadership position, there's an expectation that you're going to be taking on more because you are responsible, right, for the well-being of so many people that you're leading. However, as we just said, if you aren't taking good care of yourself and if the boundaries are lax or non-existent, it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to show up and in your fullest leadership self, right? So I think it's really important for us to examine what are the boundaries that I already have in place and where can those improve? And that might look like, do I have a firm cutoff on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from work? Where maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays are my later workday, where I'm there till 7:30, whatever the time is that you need to work. But then on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, you're off at 5 p.m. You close the laptop, you turn off the phone and the email, and you completely disconnect from work, right? What are we doing on the weekends to recharge? So self-care on those weekends. And self-care doesn't mean that we're sitting there and we're trying to catch up on the work tasks, right? It's once again about doing things that refill and fulfill us. So going for a walk with your pet, taking your dog out for a walk, grabbing a nice meal to eat, right? Going out and enjoying the sunshine, listening to the birds, all of these things can be small tasks that we can put into place that help to engage in self-care. And that in and of itself will mitigate some of that impact of burnout. And if you recognize, wow, I am really having a hard time, which once again, we've all been there, right, at some point, then I would recommend connecting with a therapist because there's something beautiful about having a confidential space where you can be open and honest. Nobody will ever know what you're speaking about. And you can process and work through and develop the skills to manage these stressors going forward.
Yes, yes. I think that it is really important to speak about this and to speak about this more so that people are more open, not afraid to reach out for help. Even if the only thing they need is just a conversation, an honest conversation, and that's it. Very often, this is enough to work to talk through some problems. And also, Nidhi, I wanted to cover one more thing that you mentioned before, that many high achievers, high performers are getting appreciation from their peers, from their colleagues. So what can we do if we are seeing someone in our team who is working late hours, who is actually amazing in all the projects and is getting involved in some nonprofit organizations and has family? And do we encourage this behavior of overachievement, or can we do something to break this pattern?
That's a great question. I think that we definitely have to toe a line here, right? So there is value to achieving, and how we all got to leadership positions is through achievement. So there's an intrinsic attachment to doing things well and doing things thoroughly. However, I think on an organizational level, what we can do to support high achievers is perhaps we have programs that are incentivized for people to take time off. Something that a lot of leaders don't think about is that time is actually the greatest reward that we can give employees. And so let's say that somebody just did a phenomenal job on a project, they worked late hours. Perhaps their reward is we give them a few days off of work and we encourage it. In fact, we're like, hey, you did an amazing job. We are so appreciative. Why don't you take the next week off? Because you worked so hard on this and we know how many hours you put in. So if we are the ones that are encouraging it, it takes the onus off of the individual who's the high achiever who may feel guilty or ashamed of needing that time off, and they may not want to ask for it, right? So my husband's team actually does something really cool. I love this. They have a email that they can send out, and it's basically a cute meme that they send, and it says, "Can't do it today, I just can't," right? It's like a mental health day, and the leaders are the ones that are modeling how to utilize this. So they themselves will schedule it on the calendar and send it out to the team that today's an "I can't do it" day, right? To model what it's like to do a mental health day. And so what this does is it sets up a culture now from the top down that, hey, it's okay for you to take care of your mental well-being. And in fact, we encourage it in a really cute way, right? So I think that there's ways on an organizational level that we can help to support the high achievers, and recognizing and understanding they may not ask for that time off. We may have to encourage it ourselves.
Yes, yes, this is great. Actually, I love it. Can do it today day. I need to think about introducing this in my workspace. So also the other thing that just came to my mind right now is we can instead of encouraging and saying, "Great job, it's amazing, you're so inspiring, how can you do so many things?" We can just say, we can just ask, "How are you?" Maybe we can ask, "So what's up with you? Do you want to chat? Do you want to have coffee?" Or, you know, to make it those people who are stressed by so many tasks they have, to make them maybe have more kind of human connection than encouraging them to perform even more. So I think that what those people need, who are high achievers and high performers, they need a little bit of this just human appreciation. So you are okay, you're fine as you are. You don't need to be a senior manager or a, I don't know, marathon runner, or achieve any amazing things, any new amazing things. So it is already enough what you achieved. So I think this is just what came to my mind, is we can support with having a chat and having kind of encouraging conversation, but not encouraging even more achievement.
100%, 100%. I think that gone are the days of the ivory tower leader who's behind a closed door with a pin code. I think that those days are getting actually faded out now, because what people really want is they want to feel authentic connection to their leaders. And I think that it's so important that we don't underestimate the value of simply checking in on the people that we're leading and having a one-on-one 15 to 20-minute conversation where it's completely unwork related. And of course have boundaries there, sure, but just checking in, as you said, Elena, and asking them, "Hey, how are you doing? And you're doing great just as you are. You don't have to do anything else. You are greatly appreciated for all that you've already achieved," right? And that you don't need to achieve any more to continue to be valued, that we still are going to get the job done. Of course, business is business, so we have to get things done, but the pressure isn't there for it to be the next level and the next level. And we fall into that trap usually, right? We achieve one thing and we're like, all right, what's the next thing I have to do? And what's that next thing? And if we can just be okay and be gentle with ourselves and appreciate, hey, I accomplished this thing, let me appreciate it for a moment. That goes a long, long way. So I totally agree with you 100% on that.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And also there's this culture now of setting yourself a lot of goals. And when you achieve a big goal, you don't even have time to celebrate and to appreciate the moment. You just immediately jump onto the next goal, and you don't feel the joy. So I think that this is another pattern that is causing a lot of those issues, that we don't spend time on gratitude, on appreciation, on celebration, and we need to do more of this in order to take care of our mental health and to appreciate ourselves also.
Definitely. Throw a little party for yourself when you get something done, right? Like, I really recommend that you could just do something small for yourself, even if it's taking some time where you're doing nothing. That's a reward, right? So taking time to really sit with the accomplishment versus looking for the next thing to do and next thing to achieve. I think that's a really, really important point that you're making.
Yeah. Great. So thank you, Nidhi, for great conversation. It is very interesting. A lot of interesting points we covered and discussed. So if our listeners want to contact you and to continue the conversation, where can they contact you?
Sure. Yes. So you can find me through my website, which is www.Nidhi LCSW. That's N as in Nancy, I as in India, D as in dog, HITEWARILCSW.com. And then on all of the social media platforms, my handle is at Nidhi Tewari LCSW. And you can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Clubhouse, which is my new favorite app. And that is how I met you, Elena. And I'm so grateful that I did.
Yes, Clubhouse is amazing. Recommending it to all the listeners as well. So Nidhi, thank you so much. I will put all your links to your social media under our episode. And thank you for all the amazing tips, and hope that our listeners will get a lot of value out of this episode. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And if anybody out there would like me to come to help their leadership teams to develop resilience and overcome burnout, feel free to reach out. And thank you again, Elena, for a beautiful podcast episode. And I'm so excited to have collaborated with you. Thank you again.
Thank you for listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. Did you enjoy this episode? Let me know that you listened by tagging me in your LinkedIn profile and using a hashtag Ideas and Leaders. See you in the next episode.